Hey guys, GaiaGaiyus here. With my series going over Gundam Sentinel nearly concluding, and with me starting my preliminary work on my next major project, that being Gundam Walpurgis, I wanted to make a video about a particular Gundam short story in the meantime. One that, hopefully, once Walpurgis is concluded and I begin the project after that, you'll come to an understanding about how things are going to go for it going forward. However, before I start talking about this tale and the story told in its pages, I think it'd be best to explain a little bit about its creator. Kazuhisu Kondo is not a name that most casual fans of Gundam will be familiar with. However, for us in the hardcore community, is a name that has deep ties to the franchise and the history of it. With ties to Zeta Gundam's production and being a manga artist for Bandai Hobby Magazine's B Club, the man has been a prominent figure within the franchise since its earliest and most formative years. Now, in order to understand this story, you need to understand the other tales that make up Kondo's work. Before, during, and after his tenure as the lead story head behind B Club's Zeta Gundam manga adaptation, Kondo produced for years dozens of one-shot mangas and miniseries within the pages of B Club, each detailing little snippets told throughout the Universal Century timeline, at least up until that point. In the modern era, however, many of his side stories have been largely considered by the fandom as non-canonical, as most of these miniseries and stories are seen by many as satirical, comical, and otherwise experimental in nature. Despite their status of being non-canon, many Gundam fans can look at his work as incredibly important, as it definitely reveals an interesting glimpse into the formative years of the Universal Century's expanded lore. Now, when time came around for Char's counterattack to hit the big screen, Kondo would release a tie-in manga whose art style is still seen by fans today as one of the most striking and visceral depictions of the Universal Century timeline to date, combining some of the most unique and bizarre mech designs with the most brutal mobile suit combat ever put to paper. Now, if you've seen the thumbnail of this video, you already know where I'm heading. This is Kazuhisu Kondo's legendary and infamous revival of Zeon.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, Revival of Zeon is a weird one. Many Gundam fans who've read this manga will definitely agree to that statement. There are many things within it that are a little hard to wrap your head around, at least when reading it for the first time. Firstly, and the thing that most people will immediately point out, the mobile suit designs. Yeah, let's get this out of the way. Why is the skirt armor on every suit so freaking massive? It's a weird choice. However, when we get to the actual story and the combat within it, it won't really matter, cause geez, this is gonna get gnarly. And the fact we're going to be seeing some of the most insane and hardcore mobile suit combat ever, the aesthetic designs of the mobile suits really help reinforce the underlying themes of Revival of Zeon. Secondly, and this is a list I've made, so bear with me, the AF-MSZ 0072 Zeta Gundam, the Gundam Mark II B type, the SS-MS-010 Double Zeta Gundam, the PX-00531 New Gundam, the saabe Heavy Ground type, and the PMX-003 the O2. All of these mobile suits, for each reason their own, conflict with what many Gundam fans will consider to be proper canon. However, for various reasons as well, these mobile suits don't entirely clash with that idea either. The only suit amongst these six that actually truly stands out is the Gundam Mark II B type, as those of us who know Zeta Gundam know the suit was never upgraded nor mass-produced. But gripes aside, let's get into Revival of Zeon, and by the end, I hope my coverage of this story will set the tone for the end of this video, because I have an announcement for a future project and video series that'll actually require the context of Revival of Zeon in order to make sense of. So, let us enter into the horrific opening salvos of Char's Rebellion with Kazuhisu Kondo's Revival of Zeon. All images and characters are owned by the respective companies and creators. It is the year Universal Century 0092, and the Earth Federation at this point in history is in an extremely paranoid state. It has been 3 years since the end of the First Neo-Zeon War and the Federation's Pyrrhic victory over the forces of Haman Karn and Glemy Todo, with the military aid of the AUG securing their victory, with the AUG forces reorganizing into the Londo Bell Task Force, and with a now Spacenoid-centric military now serving as the Federation's guardians in space. the sentiment of those born on Earth towards those who now serve from space has grown into an atmosphere of extremely vicious paranoia, with the Federation seeing any signs of Neo-Zeon and its remnants as their most dangerous enemies, leaving the space noids who fight against them to be confronted with nothing but malice and contempt from their foes. However, rumors have spread that Neo-Zeon has been rallying in secret around a new leader. It is unconfirmed at this precise time, but rumor has it that Char Aznable has re-emerged since his disappearance during the Grips War, and the forces of Neo-Zeon are now rallying under his banner. Because of the fear that the name Char instills, the Federation has begun to crack down on some of the largest last remaining Neo-Zeon strongholds that still remain on the Earth, the last vestiges of Hamon's forces that were garrisoned on the planet after her invasion. Their fortresses have managed to hold out for the past few years, as the Federation has still been reeling from the aftermath of the past few wars. However, with the possible re-emergence of Char, the Federation fears the impact these strongholds could pose. If these forces were to remain, they could possibly gain Char's forces a distinct advantage, if Char ever plans to invade the Earth, that is. Thus, Federation forces have been dispatched to eliminate them all. Our story begins in low orbit, on board a Federation G-class assault landing ship, who is sitting in a loose formation with several other sister vessels, the Glorious, the Glissade, and the ship will be following, the Nizno. In the briefing room, the commander gives these troops their orders to eliminate a vital Neo-Zeon supply base located on the eastern tip of Scandinavia, believed to be the location of a possible Neo-Zeon stronghold and staging ground for a possible landing operation into Europe. The Special Forces Mobile Suit Squads of the Glorious, designated under the call sign JG-57, are ordered to provide a diversionary assault on the enemy, while the forces of units JG-54 and JG-27 will initiate a drop and shock operation, with their forces landing in the heart of their position and assaulting their central base. As soon as they land, Assault Command will bombard their positions to ensure the total destruction of both the facility and the Axis Zeon remnants. When the bombardment begins, their G-class landing ships will enter from orbit to provide support for their mop-up. With the fleets of ships entering the atmosphere, they soon enter the enemy's territory. As their mission begins, we cut to the surface of the Scandinavian peninsula. The entire region is locked in an intense blizzard. A group of Zeon mobile suits stand at the ready, all modified for Arctic combat. Dwadges, captured Marasais, as well as a mobile suit that we've never seen before. It's shorter than the others, only about 2/3 the size of the others, yet despite that, is still imposing with its extremely thick armor plates. The MS-109A, also known as the Goblin. These suits are designed with cost-effectiveness in mind. Thus, despite their small size and thick yet cheap armor, they make up for the loss in stature with surprising ground agility in combat. As the fleet goes into its entry phase, the ship's mobile suit force is ready for battle. Despite the fact these ships are simply just another descendant of the lowly Pegasus class, these G-class warships have been armed to the teeth with some extremely powerful mobile suits, to the point it can be seen as overkill by many. The first groups head out, leading the diversion. A squadron of around 6 mobile suits launches from the Glorious. These units, the AF-MSZ Zeta Gundams, despite their bizarre ID codes and gaudy appearances, these suits are actually easily identifiable as being heavily modified and customized Zeta Pluses. The reason they aren't just Zeta Pluses in this story mainly just has to do with the whole fact that Sunrise, at the time, doesn't really own anything when it comes to Sentinel. Something that many fans know, but at least this story tries to incorporate, but just doesn't do it by name. Anyways, this squadron of Zetas are sent down to the surface. They race at low altitude along the frozen wastes. We cut to the enemy's fortress, and wait. Hey! This is just the Battle of Hoth! Literally, that's Echo Base right there! Come on, Gundam! Don't be Star Wars right now. This is serious. Ugh, come on. Anyways, overlooking that, the Zeon forces mount the trenches, turrets, infantry, and mobile suits in key positions, alarm sirens blaring throughout the howling Arctic winds. The Zeta Squadron spots them, each of them opening fire with their back-mounted beam rifles, their energy streams pounding the fortifications, the defenders opening fire. A Dwadge blasts one of the Zetas out of the air, sending it spiraling into the ground in a ball of fire. The Zeta pilot's wingman cries out as he watches the man's suit impact the ground, but the squadron leader pulls his attention back to their attack. If they break off formation, they'll all be dead. The defense turrets pound, but the Zetas push through, blowing them to bits. As the Zetas jet past their defensive line, one of the goblins manages to clip the wing of the squadron leader. The pilot spirals it out, the goblin still peppering it with shots, only for the Zeta to transform mid-flight, landing on the ground and splitting the goblin from head to toe. The Zeta jumping to the side with a reactor explosion from the goblin's generator. He turns to the right, his teammate drawing his rifle. Another goblin is riddled with shrapnel in an instant. He spots another squadron mate with half a dozen enemies taking aim at the other members trying to land. With a blast to the leading dodge, the group holds the line as they push forward. As the Zetas continue their diversion, we turn to the main assault group, who have just made their landing. Nearly a dozen mobile suits crash through the trenches, smashing the defenses as if they were made of paper, blowing Barasais to pieces with ease, all of them sporting the visage of the Gundam Mark II. The pilots of these machines shouting out over the comms as they mow down the Zeon ground troops trying to flee, saying to not let a single one of these Zeon bastards live. Don't let a single one survive. And with those words, the Defender's main generator explodes. The airborne Zetas burning the final remnants of the Zeon outpost to the ground in minutes, as if the Defenders even really stood a chance in the first place. As one of the Zetas towers over the Inferno, it watches as the assault ships make their arrival. The shadow of the cruiser blending in with the darkened smoke. The smoldering wreckage of the base, now a blackened pit of ash. Pause. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the one thing that makes the least amount of sense when it comes to the plausibility of this entire story, and that is the mobile suits that I've mentioned before. If you are a hardcore fan of the UC, you'll know that the Gundam Mark II was never mass-produced, and for good reasons. Seeing this armada of mobile suits drop down and decimate the Zeon forces is really cool, but the fact that it's literally over a dozen suits that shouldn't exist is kind of bothersome. As for the Zetas, these guys are actually a lot more plausible, as despite their name, they actually share a lot of visual similarities with the Zeta Plus series of suits. These machines, if we were looking at these from a more modern design perspective, then I could see the Zetas of the Strike Team being highly retooled variants of the Zeta Plus, made for atmospheric combat and anti-ground assault. Now, what I would like to do right now is sort of play with a little experiment I've had going. Say we were going to update the events of this story, with modern canonical units to replace the ones depicted. What machine would best suit this story as the best replacement for the Mark II-B type? Well, my first thought for this went immediately to the Gym 3. However, the Gym 3s themselves already appear in the story. So, what other options do we have? Jagans? No, those appear in this manga too. Jettas? Perhaps, but their silhouette is a little too different from the Mark II. Then what could it be? Well, I actually have a suit that might work. Given the fact that this Federation assault force uses highly modified and retooled versions of Zeta Pluses, then we actually have a much better set of options. Yet one, however, actually works quite well with the time frame and the technological advances and limitations of this time period. That choice actually drove me to the Nemo Rhymes. The Nemo Rhymes is a mass-production mobile suit that appears in Gundam Walpurgis. It's intended to be a powerful improvement over the original Nemo, one that even incorporates technology and equipment from the Gundam Mark II. So, how do we get Mark IIs out of Nemos? Well, retool the shoulders and arms, shorten the leg verniers and the sides, and you're good. All you gotta do is track down some Gundam Mark II spare heads and Gym 3 backpacks, and you've got an entire assault force of suits that look like Gundam Mark IIs, which I think is the whole point behind their inclusion, as these Gundam Mark IIs are no doubt being used for the sole fact they can be used as a tool for psychological warfare. Now, I know that with that idea, it's a lot of work, but honestly, that's probably my only gripe about the mobile suits in the story when it comes to their lore. The Mark II-B type we see in Revival of Zeon is the only suit out of the bunch that has the least plausible lore to it. The Mark II was never going to be upgraded, and mass production of the unit is highly unlikely, as the Mark II was a very costly benchmark project for the Federation in the end, and with suits like the Gym 3 and the Barzam taking center stage after its debut, it's hard to imagine a unit like this being used in the first place and in such a large scale. Regardless, the Mark II-B type is a fun idea, if it is a little bit of a stretch. The opening chapter of this manga is meant to do a very specific thing, and that is to show us that Zeon are at a clear disadvantage in this conflict. Ever since the first Neo-Zeon War ended and Hamon's forces were left behind while she secured her throne at Core 3, I mean, look at what that got her, but that's beside the point, the Neo-Zeon remnants left on Earth have been without much of a clear advantage when it comes to technological might and firepower. Heck, with what we just saw with that last battle, the Federation's choice of weapons can honestly be seen as insane. They used an armada of Zeta Gundams and Gundam Mark IIs to annihilate a lowly frozen outpost in the middle of nowhere that was guarded by Dwages. Freaking Dwages! Pretty much a bunch of slightly upgraded suits from the One-Year War and the Grips War as well, and they used highly advanced mass production Zeta Gundams to turn them all into Swiss cheese. Now, I'm getting off track here. With the beginning of Chapter 2, we see that the Federation strike team, along with their G-class motherships, have dispersed to various bases to refuel and resupply. We see one of the G-class warships from the strike team has landed at the Federation Forces' European port of Belfast, the Nizno, as shown before. Upon landing, we see that the ship is already being fitted for another deployment. The place is bustling, and surprisingly, Amuro Ray is even here along with the Rakai Loom as well to resupply. Unfortunately, his introduction is cut short as we see the pilots of the Nizno have also made their own arrival. The pilots who arrive on the base leave the air around this facility with an aura of disgust. You can even tell that Amuro, despite appearing in a single panel, isn't exactly fond of the soldiers he's encountering at this facility. They're cocky, arrogant, and boast about the way they easily demolished the Zeon fortress, with some of them flaunting the amount of kills they've acquired. These pilots from the Nizno are the type of soldiers that we'd see in groups like the Titans, or even worse, the type of arrogance that would create a faction later on, such as the Manhunters. Regardless, we see that at this base, another ship is about to head out into battle. The forces of the Nizno are being transferred to a Garuda to continue their mission on the Earth's surface. As we see it take off, we cut to the desert, to Africa. It is here we are introduced to a frequently reoccurring character from Kondo's other one-shots and miniseries, this being a Zeon officer by the name of Frederick Brown. In many of Kondo's stories that have featured this guy, they mainly focused on him in his early years, being the plucky young pilot behind the controls of a Zaku during the One-Year War. However, with revival of Zeon, Frederick is still around and still fighting for the cause. He's become much more grizzled ever since the war ended, and with his forces being left behind by Haman Karn during the first Neo-Zeon War, the man is hoping to get his men back into space, as more of these Federation-led crackdowns increase. Down at their little outpost, a couple of Doms and Goblins help offload a massive new weapon for Frederick's men to use, something provided to them through Zeon-backed channels. This colossal mobile weapon is far too large to be considered a mobile armor, but still humanoid enough to be seen as a mobile suit. This gargantuan machine is known as the O2. Now, despite its name and appearance, this machine is not a direct descendant of the O. Rather, this mobile armor was constructed using combat data that Neo-Zeon managed to acquire on the original mobile suit during the Grips War. The machine is large and intimidating and has 5 times the power of a traditional mobile suit, but interestingly, does not show any physical DNA with the original O. Rather, it's just a suit made from scratch. It is unknown how many of these massive things are out there, but listening to the mechanic do a checklist on the suit's delivery, it's possible that this isn't the only one of these copycats that are out there. Regardless, the officers of this Africa Corps are grateful for Brown's work. The fact he was able to get them this massive weapon to them, with even a few more mobile suits to aid them, is a huge blessing. Brown asks how the situation is, and the officer brings him into their command room, on the bridge of a large desert land battleship. Once they reach the map display in the center of the room, the officer relays the current state of things to Brown. Currently, the Federation forces have been pushing hard and fast into their territory. For the past few days, their own forces have been able to keep them diverted. However, time seems to be running out, and the Federation will be closing in on this area in no time. Brown himself blames this situation on what happened in the first Neo-Zeon War. Haman returned to space to reclaim Side 3, leaving what forces that were garrisoned on Earth to fend for themselves with no supplies. However, Brown makes note of the recent rumors. A new leader has emerged, with the other officer wondering if it's true that Char has returned. It would appear so. Brown himself has been hearing word of some major plans from the higher-ups. Several key Neo-Zeon members and forces have begun to withdraw from the planet. Whatever this new leader is planning, it must be something big. Brown unveils that these new orders are one of the big reasons he's here, to create a large enough diversion until such key assets are evacuated. Once their diversionary attack is completed, they'll make their withdrawal as well. As the officer understands his new orders, we immediately cut to the Federation strike team on the Garuda. The Zeta Squadron has brought out a new unit to aid them in their strike, one under the command of the squadron's leader, a massive and highly upgraded model of Double Zeta Gundam. The main force of ground units have been tasked with attacking the front line, while the Zetas once again provide a diversion by attacking them from their exposed rear. The Zetas escort the massive Double Zeta bomber as they head towards their base. We turn to the front line, and over 30 mobile suits are engaging the Zeon forces in a heated battle across the desert plains. Gym 3s, demos, and even a contingent of those what appear to be Gundam Mark IIs. The two forces exchange fire, with both sides destroying each other as the front lines become a chaotic frenzy. The fighting is so bad that even a Rigazi, one of the first of its kind, deploys from its Wave Rider pack, landing a kill on a Zaku mid-landing, only to be instantly annihilated the moment it sets foot on the ground. The desert heat turns to blackened smoke as the flames roar throughout the battlefield. The Zeta Squadron emerges and begins to make ready to destroy the Zeon outpost. They race in low and fast, another cakewalk for these aces. However, as the missile strikes begin, the massive VO2 activates as the Zetas miss it by a hair, with Frederick Brown manning the controls himself. As the Zetas circle around for another pass, the O2 retaliates with a burst of chest-mounted artillery fire, with two Zaku tanks that the outpost have been using for labor, using anti-aircraft weapons to pound the Zetas with flak, their cannons tearing Rigazi after Rigazi with a storm of pounding shells, with the pilot of the O offering to hold the line for them so that they can't let a single one of these Zetas get past them. However, as they hold the line against the main attackers, the Zetas on the other side begin their bombing run. A storm of transformable mobile suits race toward the Zeon command center. The desert battleship's own guard units of Dwajas and desert Zakus are torn to shreds as air-to-surface guided missiles deploy from the Zeta's wings, bashing their lines as they storm through the Zeon rear line. However, the Zeon forces aren't giving up that easily. A Dwaj manages to blow one of the Zeta's cockpits to pieces with a single shot from its machine gun. As the unit burns, a pair of Desert Zakus lay their weapons to bear. They aren't letting any of them get past them, but this confident statement is greatly proven wrong. One mobile suit has broken past them. It fires a blast from its double-barrel beam rifle that punches a seamless hole through one of the Zakus with ease, the other one turning around only to gaze down the barrel of that same rifle, the blast melting through the top half of the other Zaku as if it were made of butter, and turning one of the land battleships behind it to ash. Frederick and the O gets the message. They've lost contact with their supply base. Enemies are to their rear. They need to redeploy. Frederick leaves command of their forward line to another officer, who himself is piloting a captured Rick Diaz. Hopefully the unit's higher than average performance will be enough to hold the line with the others. Chapter 3. As the battle progresses, we cut to the air. Strangely, of all things, a GAU transport plane is on its way to the battlefield. Seems Frederick Brown's forces have been entirely cut off from the main forces, and an immediate mission to rescue them is now swiftly underway. In the GAU's hangar, a pair of unique mobile suits are preparing for takeoff, an interceptor pair of Sturmjägers. These machines are heavily modified versions of the Gaplant, with their arms and wing binders combined to supply the unit with a much more powerful weapons payload. However, despite the significant amount of power these units possess, their job is only to gain air superiority temporarily. Despite this, they do have an ace with them who might be able to lend them the edge they need, an ensign by the name of Mare, the so-called Witch of Sirius. With a sudden jolt from the GAU's launched catapult, the Jaegers launch into the fray, dashing off towards the rear of the Federation's approaching line. We turn to the ground, and the rear guard of the Federation's advance. A group of Gym 3s are holding back and watching as the battle unfolds. However, as these grunts just stand around, the O2 blasts through them and barrels its way across the sand, smoking a trio of Gym 3s as it makes its way over the hills, with Federation soldiers caught with their pants down as the massive mobile armor smashes against their rear line of tanks. An early warning type Nemo attempts to transmit a distress call from its hiding place inside a crater, only for one of the goblins to sneak from behind and blast it to pieces before it can. Frederick orders his men. Don't stop moving. If you stop, you're an instant target. The machine is crushing everything. Gym 3s, Nemos, even some of those scrap-built Mark IIs are getting pulverized as this thing cuts a swathe through their forces with its escorts in tow. But as they push forward, the escorts begin to have the worst possible thing happen to them at the worst possible time. No ammo. One of the O's escort suits is cut to pieces as the machine's pilot orders his men to withdraw and regroup. But as they attempt to get to safety, the O itself is bombarded intensely by more passing attacks from the Zetas now reaching their area. The blast and smoke buying the Federation forces time to return fire. Bazooka rounds, beam cannon blasts, machine guns, explosions pound the ground surrounding the gargantuan mobile suit behemoth. But as the smoke rises and dust fills the air, their reinforcements arrive. The Sturm Jaegers down one of the Zetas as they initiate a bombing run on the Gym 3s still on the ground. The Zetas spot them and try to give chase, only for Ensign Mare to pull an insane maneuver as she takes out her opponent. Mare's wingman sharply pulling into the air, leaving Mare to shoot the Zeta down, only to transform mid-flight as the unit stalls out of the air, smashing into the ground and blasting another Gym 3 as it slams into the surface with its feet. The O sees their chance. While they're down, hurry, get back towards their command ship. They just need to make it. Over at one of the other land cruisers, the thing is on the move and being bombarded continuously by the remaining Zetas in the air. The goblins and dwages on the ground having a hard time keeping up with the speed of these attacks. But just as the ship takes a direct hit and begins to slow, the Federation pilot seeing a chance to sink it, the O2 mows down one of the other Zetas as it guards the escaping vessel. He orders the ship's crew to get out of there, with them trying to do their best just to get the damn thing moving. The O slides across the desert, firing at anything that shows itself. Nothing's getting past him. However, a dark shadow blasts inches behind the suit at a breakneck speed. Two of the land battleship's main guns explode in an instant. The O's pilot not even able to see what happened to cause the destruction, but then he spots it out of the corner of his eye. The thing is standing just a few hundred meters away, the double Zeta, the massive suit firing a blast at the O, sending a smoky cloud of flames and dust into the air, the machine's pilot wondering if he managed to take it out, being at such close range, but it doesn't. The smoke cloud erupts, the O2 racing towards the Double Zeta at top speed, charging the Double Zeta and ramming the thing with its own shoulder. The smoke begins to part. The GAU has arrived. It plans to rescue the bridge crew of the land cruiser as the O holds its ground. Goblins blasting what they can as the O presses against the Double Zeta with its hover jets at maximum power. The massive Gundam trying to equip its Mega Beam Saber only for the O to draw one of its own with the use of its subarms, slicing the thing's arm off with a single swing. The crew is quickly recovered. Some of the mobile suits still docked in the land cruiser's hangar offload onto the GAU. A pair of oddly looking Bolanoak Saman looking things. Don't know how the hell those got there, but at least it's a unit that saw at least some kind of limited production. The crew of the GAU, detecting the arrival of the remaining Federation forces pressing in, orders Brown to withdraw. However, he tells them not to worry about him. They have to get out of here. As the Mark IIs begin to surround him, the GAU prepares for takeoff, blasting off at maximum speed as the enemy begins to encircle them. With the transport lifting off and blasting out of the combat zone, the Double Zeta pilot gets annoyed. "You're not making this easy, are you?" He charges the unit's high mega cannon, the unit's upgraded weapon unleashing a full blast of energy that melts the O's head clean off from the base of its shoulders, the top section of the entire suit from just above the cockpit getting turned to molten slag. As the machine is shoved to the side, the pilot realizes that he wasted the Double Zeta's entire power supply on using the high mega cannon. The Gundam looking on as the GAU transport flees, the Gundam's pilot no doubt being furious that his last remaining target escaped. As the O burns from the neck down, Frederick climbs out of his smoking cockpit, himself looking on as the enemy Mark IIs emerge from the clouds of flaming debris, the man somewhat coming to a moment of calm. Perhaps now is the time that he finally meets his retribution. However, this moment of him waiting for his own demise never comes. A series of explosions blast through the approaching horde. The Mark IIs caught off guard as Ensign Mare swoops in, telling Frederick to grab her hand as the Sturm Jaeger jets off with the two of them in tow, the unit in its mobile armor mode, clearing a blazing path as it escapes with the GAU. The heroes finally escaped. Chapter 4. For the first time in this story, we cut to space, to the colony of Sweetwater. The Neo-Zeon Council goes over their current plans to push Fifth Luna onto Lhasa, the preparations to the nuclear pulse thrusters, the deployment of Gyaradogas to their respective units. All seems to be proceeding well. Char himself is even here, acting as overseer. He asks about the status of their ground forces, his officers stating that they managed to regain contact with them and efforts are being made in Europe to ensure that they have a strong foothold on the continent. However, with Char himself knowing of the fact that the asteroid will be dropped very soon, he orders that their forces begin evacuations immediately. He's even authorizing the use of whatever means to get them into space, whatever new weapons they have to get their fellow spacenoids home. We cut back down to the planet's surface, and a double Zeta core fighter is monitoring a forest below. It's silent. The pilots questioning if their orders were correct, that Neo-Zeon forces were really detected in this area. However, the place seems calm, no signs of human activity. As the fighter circles around and jets off back to base, forest trees shake. A group of mobile suits hide beneath the brush, wrapped in camouflage, Gyaradogas, and a saabe. You see, the saabe we all know and love. The one used by Char was the prototype for this machine. The one we're seeing here is a spare unit that was reconfigured for ground combat. The suit sporting a forest green camo paint job and a heavy beam machine gun. As the core fighter leaves, a Zeon officer emerges from the cockpit, the man going by the name of Kurtz. The man is glad to see that the enemy patrols have left. As he stands next to the mobile suit's head, another officer comes out to greet him, the man asking him to come to the command center right away. Over in the control room, a group of officers go over their current strategy. Currently, their plan is to take the spaceport of Verboten. If they can capture it before nightfall, the enemy forces and supplies will be delayed by another 2 to 3 months. However, this mission will be fought in the fog, so visibility will be limited. Luckily, they have an ace like Kurtz to help them. The man has made quite a name for himself fighting on the Eastern Front, but with the Federation strike teams still lurking around with such superior mobile suits, things will be difficult. They're banking on their opponents. None of them know that a single Neo-Zeon soldier is here. Surprise will be the key to taking this facility. With Kurtz entering the room with his saabe checked and ready, he's given his orders. They have 8 hours to take the base. They're leaving at 05:14. His men must make themselves ready for launch immediately. We then turn to space. Another new Federation strike team is coming to aid the forces of the Nizno, made up of 3 warships. The vessels appearing to be an early variant of the Rock Hylu. In one of the ship's hangars, a new mobile suit is prepping for battle, one that has been specifically sent to the ship for testing, a new Gundam. However, despite the machine appearing to bear the same resemblance as Amuro's unit, this new Gundam isn't exactly on the same level. The new Gundam prototype has no psychoframe nor funnels. Once the unit conducts ground tests, the machine will finally be outfitted with a Psychomu. The mechanics, however, are still in awe as they look at the amazing new machine standing before them. They heard Amuro Ray himself design this thing, the officers noting that Amuro no doubt wanted the perfect weapon made for the Federation once he heard that Char had returned. Down on the ground, a Federation convoy is making its way into the heart of the forest, the pilots still not being able to find anything. The fog is far too thick, the squad completely unaware that the saabe and its Gyaradoga escorts are stalking them from the rear. As one of them turns, they see the silhouette of the saabe's unit beside them, the pilot wondering what unit they're from. The fog playing hell with what they can see. As the fog begins to clear, the suit draws close. The saabe instantly nails a Jagan in the torso, blowing the suit to smithereens. With the Federation squad caught completely by surprise, the other Jagans are also taken out by the Gyaradogas. The convoy is in disarray. Gym 3s explode as tanks try to flee. Federation soldiers panicking as the saabe rips off its camo netting, tearing machine gun rounds into the passing troops. As the fighting intensifies, the Rock Hyloom-class cruisers enter low atmosphere, a transport shuttle detaching from one of the ship's bows and burning through the atmosphere. The Zeon forces push forward, Gym 3s blowing to bits with the saabe and more Neo-Zeon suits ripping through the convoy towards the base. As they press on, the shuttle we saw leave the cruiser finishes its burnout. Pilots unable to reach the base's control tower as they make landfall. They can see the fighting below with the smoke stretching across the horizon. As the transport ship flies, the ship's co-pilot, one of the new Gundam's test pilots, leaves for the cargo hold. He's taking the Gundam out there, the main pilot protesting as the man leaves his seat to go help. On the ground, another Jagan explodes, cut in half by the saabe's machine gun. They can't waste any more time and have to take the base. There's just too many of them in their way. They can see the Verboten airbase. They just need to... One of the Gyaradogas explodes. Kurtz turns to his left and can see it racing across the open clearing. It's a new model, a Gundam. It blasts one of the Marasai's positioned to their flank. Kurtz orders his men to spread out. Do not let this guy target them. Over with the new Gundam, the pilot can see their commander, the two units zipping around the battlefield with hoverjets engaged. Each of the massive commander units blasting grunts from both sides as they dart around their reactor explosions. The new Gundam's thrusters redlining as he pushes the unit near the limit. As the saabe lines up a perfect shot and fires, an explosion rips out before the new Gundam. Kurtz wonders if he got him, but the new Gundam managed to leap into the air just as the blast hit the ground, blasting into the air and taking a shot that takes out the saabe's right arm. As the new Gundam stands at a distance, ready to deal the final blow with his thrusters at max, the man is completely stunned as he sees that he pushed the Gundam's prototype thrusters too far, the unit's reactor overheating. The pilot looks up and sees the saabe. He may have taken out the unit's beam rifle, but he didn't destroy its only weapon. The saabe raises its arm, a Sturmfaust mounted underneath its shield. With a single arcing shot, the missile hits the Gundam directly in the cockpit, the Gundam exploding as the explosive blows apart the entire new Gundam's torso with a single shot, ending the battle with a Zeon victory. And with that victory comes the end of Chapter 4. With the loss of the Federation's verboten base, the Federation battle line would have to be restructured far from its original position. The new Gundam project, with the loss of one of its key prototypes, has taken a severe blow to its development, and Lieutenant Kurtz, for his own skill in commanding their forces in battle, is gratefully awarded the Zeon Cross. As we turn to Chapter 5, and the final chapter, we learn why it is that Zeon wanted this base once again. Verboten serves as a massive HLV launch site for the Federation. With its captured shuttles, the Zeon forces on Earth have begun their exodus into space. With a massive Zeon contingent now moving towards this base to rendezvous, Federation has now taken note of this plan, and has once again sent the forces comprised of the G-class warships to suppress them. Over with the Zeons, as they load transport after transport with their own troops, Frederick Brown and his men have been tasked with acting as the rear guard for their evacuation, the man now sporting a new mobile suit to command their forces, the PMX-005, the Breda, and with the forces from Kurtz's strike team lending him a hand, the stage is set for a final battle between Frederick Brown's forces and the strike teams of the Naisno. Up in the sky, the G-class ships ready to charge the enemy. They prepare the Double Zeta Gundam for battle, the G-bomber being released from its mooring beneath the ship, along with a handful of Zetas to cover its entry. Over at the base's control tower, they've detected the arrival of the Federation's strike team. Frederick orders the halting of the cargo loading and commands them that the shuttle begin loading personnel immediately. He even orders the pilots of his own Giradoga team to go with them. All they have to do is hold the line against them for at least 30 minutes, so that the launch sequence can be completed. As his subordinates protest, asking what Brown will do, he says he's got this. He didn't come all this way to get killed. The Zetas push forward. Stormy skies begin to draw closer to the horizon as they blast off towards the base's airspace. As they soar from above, the Breda takes aim, blasting and downing one of the Zetas, sending the squadron into a panic. Where did that come from? As the Zetas scatter and Frederick looks down, a beam explosion rips across his feet. He looks over and can see one of the double Zetas coming from beside him, and as he looks at it, he can see another one, and another one. There's 3 of them. But as the machines land and ready to take aim at the experimental Breda mobile suit, the one standing before Fred has its head completely blown off, the trio being pelted with explosions as a massive object closes in on them. It lands before the Breda. It's Mare. She's here with Kurtz and the saabe. She herself is piloting something new. A mobile armor. It's huge, hulking, and fast. This mobile armor is known as the G3 Gadre. Birthed from the same lineage as the Elmeth herself, this mobile armor is one of the most powerful things that this force possesses. The 2 other pilots deciding to stay and help Frederick hold off the enemy strike team. With the saabe laying cover fire, the massive mobile armor fires its beam cannons in a massive barrage. The Federation G-class strike teams, the ones we've seen in this story, cut Zeon troops to pieces constantly in these battles, are nearly all torn to shreds as the mobile armor cleaves through 5 of the Zeta types with ease. With the double Zetas taking severe damage, but not enough to disable them, their leader takes aim at the Beretta, trying to fire a blast in retaliation. The round misses just by a hair. One of the other Double Zetas beside him tries to blast the God Ray, only for his unit to have its left shoulder melted off from his own shots as the Mega Beam attack is rebounded off the mobile armor's eye field, with their first strike resulting in a complete failure, and with the Federation strike team losing most of its best suits in the opening strikes of this entire assault. The lead Double Zeta pilot, and the leader we've seen before, cocky as ever, wonders how it is that they've lost so many of their troops already, but as he asks that question, he can already see that it's done. The HLVs have taken off, the man telling the Zeon pilots over the open comms that this isn't over yet. He takes aim towards the group of fleeing transports, hoping to land a shot, only for his double-barrel Mega Beam rifle to blow up in his own hand. The three Zeon pilots look up and can see that one of their ships, a Zanzibar-class transport, has broken away to come help them. It pelts the remaining Federation suits with a hail of missiles, granting the God Ray a chance to carry the other two mobile suits into the air and onto the last fleeing transport. As the three machines board the ship's cargo hold, the transport changes its course to regroup with the others. However, the G-classes still remain. They're right in front of their flight path. With the captain ordering the use of anti-ship missiles, the Zanzibar fires a barrage towards the enemy fleet, the ship flying at max speed through their formation and crippling the superstructure of one of the G-class carriers as it bolts off into space. With the Zeon forces finally escaping the planet, the Federation is left crippled, and ending revival of Zeon, with our three little misfits heading off back into space to return home and fight on for another day. So, now that this is over, we can finally start talking about everything that just happened. Revival of Zeon is definitely a strange one. It is a story that not many casual fans might understand after their first reading, because this side story is definitely one of the hardest ones to read. The plot is incredibly fast-paced, and we aren't given much time with the characters to learn about them, and the entire story is almost entirely focused on portraying the carnage of its mobile suit combat. Nonetheless, I do think this story is one that needs to be told. When you look back at Double Zeta, it would make a lot of sense for a majority of the Zeon forces left behind by Haman to become targets for Federation retaliation, and seeing that the ones tasked with hunting them down are some of the cruelest and most vicious pilots within the Federation forces just goes to show the kind of lengths the Federation is willing to go when it comes to eliminating the threat of Neo Zeon before it becomes too much. But now with the Federation losing such valuable and powerful machines in these battles, we can now see that with Char's counterattack, we can definitely see the kind of effect it's had on the Federation's response in the future events of Char's rebellion. Londo Bell really is the only real thing holding off Char's return now. Now, at a future point, I would really like to cover Revival of Zeon Remnant 1. However, at the moment, that manga hasn't been fully translated. But once that story is fully out, I would like to explore it in detail, as that manga actually picks up directly after the events of this story, showing Frederick Brown and company's hands in the actual battles of Char's counterattack and the siege of Fifth Luna. So, one of the things that gets debated a lot when it comes to the story is, how can this be canon? There are all these suits that appear, yet all of them contradict the Universal Century lore in some way. And what I've got to say is actually, nothing seems to be truly broken with this. Every suit that appears is either a prototype, a knockoff, or a heavy modification of a pre-existing design. Yeah, sure, you can make a point about the Double Zetas, but if we look at things from a modern lore perspective, we have suits like the Theta Plus, which can be seen as proper mass-produced versions of the Double Zeta. Oh, but what about the Mark II? Don't they say in Zeta Gundam that the suit was never upgraded? Yes, and it makes sense that the Federation wouldn't put effort into mass-producing it, with how limiting the Mark II technology is at this point, but that doesn't really stop us from doing some fun stuff in this story. If you want Mark IIs, just give the Federation a bunch of GMs and Nemos with Gundam Mark II spare heads and you're set. When it comes to Revival of Zeon, I like to look at it like this. This story is clearly meant to be an over-the-top series of artistic set pieces, so if we're going for something that's supposed to be concrete canon, then that's not really the thing we're going to get with that kind of mindset. Now, you might be wondering after all of this, why did I make a video about this story? What was the point of covering such a crazy and insane series of explosions and brutal, unimportant events? Well, it has to factor into a future project of mine, one that requires the context of Revival of Zeon in order to make sense of. Once my next major series is completed, that being Gundam Walpurgis, my next major story project after that will be another highly obscure one that not even the most hardcore Gundam fans will know the events of. That series will be on the PC-98 DOS game Mobile Suit Gundam Advanced Operation. You won't find much info about this game if you look it up, and emulating it is extremely difficult. However, I have managed to get my hands on this story, and I'm working to decipher it. The interesting thing is that this story will not just require revival of Zeon in order to provide context for it, but also Walpurgis, as Revival of Zeon and Advanced Operation both share the same Mobile Suit roster, and Advanced Operation and Walpurgis share a key character in Serana Karn. I like to look at Advanced Operation as being a story that works well to bring in Kondo's mech designs into the world of the Gundam animes. Once I've done my work on Walpurgis, I'll be beginning my work on deciphering the story and the events of it. Anyways, that'll be it for this video. Tune in next time for my final part on Gundam Sentinel. Yes, Sentinel is going to be only 4 parts instead of the 5 I had originally planned. And with part 4, we'll finally see the conclusion to the story of Task Force Alpha and the New Decides Uprising. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notification bell to make sure you're caught up with my videos. And this is GaiaGaiyus, signing off. Later!